Welcome to Prelude to Ulysses, where we are reading. We're going to go a little further into the Book of One Dead Man. No, the Book of the Gods. Part 3, number 2. Part 4, number 2. Okay. The Book of the Gods, Part 4, Part 2 of Part 4. Okay? It's simple. What was going on last time? They're fighting each other? Who's fighting who? Horus and Set are fighting each other. Whatever. I'm just going to keep reading and then I'll remember later and give a full thing. Horus began to feel as if Set's exhaustion was greater than his own. Were Set's responses as slow as they seemed? Horus flung his shield. Sudden as that, there was Set without a sword, and his skin was close to the purple of old meat. He took a step backward, and then another, and in that instant Horus lunged to take him through the heart. A clumsy move. A warrior as old as Set was not to be finished so simply. He ducked under, caught Horus by a leg, and gave a twist to drop him. Then Set smashed his shield into Horus's unprotected face. The blow shattered the nose of the boy and drove his teeth through his lips. His sword leapt out of his hand. Set kicked it away, whereupon Horus seized the shield of Set, hurled it, and missed. Now both were unarmed. Horus's face was like the disembowelment you see on a battlefield. Still, he came forward to close with Set. But the older man stepped back and took off his breastplate so that he might be more comfortable when grappling. Horus did the same. In another minute, both were naked. Since each, for his separate reasons, wished to fight in the marsh, they were soon off the field and into the swamp. But as they entered the mud, Set turned to all who were watching and revealed a mighty erection. It stood out like a branch, strong enough for a man to climb upon. Even the followers of Horus offered up their approbation, for it was a mark of great merit to have an erection in combat. That spoke of true bravery, since combat was obviously his desire. To show agreement, Menenhedet now separated his robes to show his own phallus. I might as well have been struck with the shield of Set, for Menenhedet presented a stout knob and shaft. I pretended not to notice, but I began to feel as fatigued as if I were in combat myself, and my lungs and liver shook. A curious remark, my ka, like any other, was without the substance of liver and lungs. But then I realized my canopic jars were vibrating at my feet. You are nearer to a comprehension of Ket Netter, remembered my great-grandfather? Sir. You are nearer to a comprehension of Kurt Netter, Khertneter, murmured my great-grandfather, and covered his thighs. Thank you, Grandpa. Put it away. Contemplate the shame for Horus, he said, having been shown once to the gods with his smashed face. He was now twice exposed. His lower powers were puny. Wait. His lower powers were puny. Does that mean tiny dick or back to his tiny legs? Look upon the future gods of the living, cried Set, and threw a handful of mud into Horus's face. Blinded, Horus set in a vertigo of elbows and knees and went tumbling over a stump into swamp water. Immediately, Set pushed Horus's head and shoulders into the muck. Now the boy's arms had to be used to keep his nose above the water. His weak legs were up behind him on the stump. down between his buttocks, rammed the hard phallus of Set, and oh, said Menenhedet, what an entrance. Lava was ready to boil, the Nile prepared to froth, Isis turned paler than her bark of papyrus, and Osiris became transparent again. Holy shit, man! A scream went up from Horus like the wail of a mortal boy, while Set was throbbing with pride as he held the separate cheeks in his separate hands. He singed the boy's shoulders with the fire of his breath and made ready to take entrance. No god dared to speak if Horus was to be cleaved. For this wasn't a buggery, the sport of your boyhood, where one coward inches up the lost resistance of another. Here was one of the great gods entering that male womb where time is buried. What the fuck am I reading here? Norman Mailer. Jesus. Womb? I stammered. Okay. In Ket Neter, there is a river of feces deep as a pit. Across it, the dead man must swim. The dead must swim. The caw of all but the wisest, most prepared, or most courageous will expire in that river, weeping for their mother. They have forgotten how they came out of her. Between piss and shit we are born, and in water do we die the first time, slipping off to death on the release of our waters. The celestial waters? But the second death is in the pits, full pits of the duad. Do I sit before you and fart? Do you smell every odor of the constipated, the gluttonous, the sulfuric, the caustic, the fermentative, the infectious, the rotten, the corrupt, the putrescent? It is because I had to swim in the river of feces and succeeded in crossing it, only at a great price. The spirit of human excrement is now in the breath of my ka, which is to say, in my emotions, and in my irregular courtesy. Small wonder that every disproportion is also in my manner. Yes, every happiness that was interrupted, every injustice to an honest endeavor, as well as all the squandered seeds of tender love that found no root, and this is not even to speak of energetic lust, when it has no place to go but to the coils of one's digestion. Although much of such lust turns to piss. Did you know that? Enough. You have no gift for your trip to Ket Neter. If you do not comprehend the shame, that shame and waste must be buried in shit, but so is many a rich and tender sentiment as well. How then can this cauldron of emotion be no more than a burial chamber? Is it not also a part of the womb that of all that is yet to come? What? Is not part of time reborn by necessity and shit? Where else can be found those unresolved passions which, frustrated, unworked, or by their stench maniacal, must now labor twice as hard to germinate the future? He had never been this eloquent, nor as elegant in his appearance. I could no longer see the dust of his pores in the glow these words gave onto his skin. Out of the lines of his wrinkles came a play of light. Yet the finer he looked, the more I was ready to distrust him. His language had too powerful an effect on me. I was now aroused, and by the sweetest turnings of sex, my belly was as sentimental as a flower, and my buttocks in honey. I had never felt so agreeable before. Was this the power and pleasure of a woman? Whatever had become of my pride in a phallus as dependable as my arm? To go soft before these hymns to the sinuosities of shit, it used to be a legitimate, if filthy habit to jam the force of one's own cock into the ass of any friend or enemy weak enough to take it, a way of measuring ourselves. But nonetheless, every mark of a noble Egyptian was his detestation of such dirt. The smell of the mud was too close to our lives. Our white linen spoke of the distance we maintained from such subjects. The whiter the better. So were our walls white and the complexion of our gods when we painted them. So were our noses most distinguished when they turned up nicely. Yet here was Menenhedet, seducing my attention with the glories of this repulsive topic. You are dead, he said, and the first shock is that your mind will now seek to appreciate what formerly it despised. If I have survived, it is because I overcame all sense of abhorrence in swimming in the Duad. He was now so gentle that into my sweet arousal came an unexpected tenderness for Menenhedet, the first I had felt. That gave a sense of rest. I needed to like someone other than myself, but as if my great-grandfather had no need of my good feelings, he went back without warning to his account of Set's attempt to bugger Horus. Did he succeed? Asked Menenhedet, and replied, not at this time, not here. Horus still owned, we must remember, the old thumb of Set that Isis tied in the thick hair of his head. Now, head down, the bolt of Set riding on his sphincter. He knew that if he did not escape the land of the dead, the land of the dead might yet be carved out of his bowels. So he reached up a hand, tore out a gout of hair to free the thumb, and waved it in the air. Set's erection was lost. Set abruptly Set's penis was as small as his amputated thumb. And Horus, in a tempest at last of godly fury at what had almost been done to him, seized the testicles of Set with such force that the calm of the heavens was forever disturbed. The sudden noise of a squall is equal to the fury with which Set struck back at Horus's brow. And the young man's face was soon hideous, his eyes half uprooted. He looked like a hippopotamus. On this moment, they entered a new form of battle. While transformations are common in godly war, and the gods seek to be artful in their choice, still they must be ready to take up the form of any beast they come willy-nilly to resemble. If I seem to get confused while I'm writing a lot, all the pronouns when they describe gods are written with a capital first letter to indicate godliness, but it also confuses me, and I always think it's a sentence, the first of the sentence, the first word of a sentence. They come willy-nilly to resemble. So when Set tore the eyes of Horus half out of his head and gave him the expression of a hippopotamus, Horus was obliged to turn into that unfamiliar creature. Damn. They fought then in a bog, hippopotamus against hippopotamus, with grunts, hoarse slaverings, and atrocious roars. Their limbs so short and sturdy that when each got a leg of the other in his throat, the spectacle became as obscene as the sight of hogs suckling in a trough. Yet the judges were not disgusted. This part of the battle was expected to thrash in the mires, and gather up the repulsions of the atmosphere, drain the swamps, and flush the filth of the Nile. It would have been a great purification if it had gone on, but Set called a halt. The slime of their bodies had begun to excite him. He was losing ferocity too quickly. Set had assumed that Horus, being younger, would be rendered anxious by such slippery contact. But to Horus, this steaming intimacy was gloomy. He wanted his teeth in Set. None of this slithering of torsos. He strained for that luminous instant when the rage of your effort can taste the blood of the other. His lower teeth protruded, his nostrils drew together, his skin in repudiation of such oily struggle grew bristles. His lower teeth were like tusks. He had changed into a wild boar. Applause came to him from the gods who watched. It was daring to choose the animal most like Set, and brilliant to select such a transformation, rather than to let Set choose it for the end. Horus could hardly have done better. Was there another hour of his life when he was no more a wild boar? Was there another hour of his life when he was more of a wild boar? He and Set came charging out of the marsh and ran up and down the field, slashing into each other's flanks, biting ferociously, sobbing and shrieking, carving wounds into one another, until a spray of blood flew off each time they came together with a crash. To the surprise of most, the advantage was turning to Horus. A god, like a man, is never stronger in the hour he discovers his valor. Is never stronger than in the hour he discovers his valor. Horus was delivered of oppression. He was no longer afraid to fight. What an uproar in himself. He even enjoyed the intoxication of the pain. Each time Set's teeth tore into his hide, he roared with a new ferocity. His torn eyes pulled back into the knotty little sockets of the boar, while two gems of fire looked out. His broken nose was like a red and bleeding mouth, and the teeth that cut through his lips glistened in a collar of spikes. Set fled. To the jeers of the onlookers, he retreated far enough to gain time for the last transformation. When he turned back to the field, it was as a black bear. How would they know what a black bear was in this? Such a choice was difficult to comprehend, since Horus had more of the natural build of such an animal. But the pain of Set's wounds was great enough to look for the thickest hide, and he buried himself in the meats and folds and near to impenetrable substance of a bear. There he undertook his defense. This strife between the bears went on for a day, and then a night, and before they were done, it was 3 days and 3 nights. Horus held Set in a captive grip that made him undergo a long and stubborn torment, as he was bled of the great power of a bear. To sustain himself in this pain, he had no more to call upon than the endless bitterness of his life, and it provided the fortitude not to surrender. It even enabled him to withstand the exaltation of Horus, who passed through all the intoxications of victory except victory itself, and so was exhausted finally of all enthusiasm, and merely lay with the bulk of his bare body upon the bear's body of Set, and kept his teeth in the neck of Set until all the illumination he had tasted in his enemy's blood was consumed, and Horus lay at last with his caked face in the matted fur of the other. On the morning of the 4th day, declared victor by the judges, he had ropes brought to him, and in a creaking voice ordered his assistants to pinion Set's limbs to stakes. And when they were finished, Set lay on his back, body lashed, looking at the sky. Slowly, like the change of light over the hours of the day, so did Set come back into the form of a wounded man lying near death in the field. But Horus was taken up on the shoulders of his friends and carried away to the river, where they washed his wounds and cleaned the ravages of his face. Slowly he too gave up the body of the bear. Then Horus slept for a day and a night in the joy of knowing that Set would not escape, since guards trusted by Isis were in watch over him. And as if the words could be my words, my great-grandfather now became silent. His story, however, did not cease. Indeed, I do not think it lost one thought. Waggity woo! This is a crazy book, isn't it? Okay. Just they'd be fighting. I don't remember why Horus became involved. This is a weird chapter. They are in different dimensions. Or Isis keeps reliving the. I don't remember. I think I need to read Spark Notes of everything I've just read. But I'm gonna do that and pretend like I remember everything. And then in the next time I read this book tomorrow, I'll be like, well, I remember everything that happened. When it's just a lie.